Hey everybody, welcome to this week's Roundup. I gotta record this one early again, but you all know the drill. If I miss one for this Roundup, it'll just be the first one in next week's. But let's jump in and see what we got. First up, developer Rumblemints has just released his latest NES to SNES conversion, and this one is an update of a previous conversion for Kid Icarus that adds a lot of cool stuff. And the coolest, in my opinion, is he was able to extract the backgrounds from the 3DS version and import them into this one. So in certain scenes of the game where there were just all black backgrounds or solid colors, now you have those nice backgrounds from the 3DS version, and you're able to toggle this feature on and off. There's also a randomizer built in, which I think he'd been working on before, but that got tweaked a little bit. So if you're a big fan of the game and you've played it a million times, now you could have it randomized to have the same game but a totally new experience. And there's also an MSU1 audio soundtrack as well, which you could also toggle on or off. So as long as you have any device that's able to play the MSU1 audio, you could have that option as well. So I'm a fan of these NES to SNES conversions, even if they're just vanilla, because you get so much less sprite flicker, a ton less slowdown, and a couple other options, not to mention just the fact that you are able to use the SNES controller, which I much prefer over the NES. I don't think there's anything wrong with the original NES controller, but just saying. So just a basic conversion alone I get excited about. But anytime there's tons of enhancements like this, I think it's really important for anybody who's been a fan of the game to try out. And there were some in the past that were very good, and I appreciated them, but there were others that were just over the top amazing. Of course, Infidelity's port of Metroid was amazing. I can't pronounce things today. It's going to be one of those podcasts, everybody. Strap in. Who knows what else I'll fumble today. But that was an amazing conversion as well. But also, Rumblemints' previous conversion of Super Dodgeball is now my go-to for demonstrating to people why these are so important. Because play Super Dodgeball on the NES, and then go play the conversion to the SNES, and then go back to the NES version, and you'll immediately know why these are so important. So thanks to Rumblemints and to the developer Infidelity as well for constantly making these and doing amazing conversions of these games. So thanks very much, and can't wait to see what you all come up with next. Mike Chi has recently added a 576i pass-through mode for the RetroTink 5X, as well as a bunch of other stuff. So while I do want to talk about that, I also took this opportunity in this post to kind of just sum up what's been going on with the Tink 5X. The FPGA that's being used is basically full. It's at like 99.9% capacity, but over the past year, Mike has been adding some experimental features in. Now, these experimental firmwares are open to the public, and they will not harm your Tink in any way whatsoever. And if for whatever reason they cause any kind of issues, or maybe some games or consoles now have compatibility issues, you could always switch to any other firmware for it. So it's 100% safe to use. The only reason Mike is calling them experimental is because due to all of the other stuff he's got going on, he hasn't had the time to really dig in and test these in the normal way that he would. So these experimental firmwares are basically like, hey, you all try it, let me know what you find, and hopefully everything will work out. And they've all been pretty solid for me personally. So I put this post together with a list of all of the changes since the last official release, if you're interested. And there are quite a few in there, including the 480i pass-through mode that I talked about in the previous video I released. But the one complaint that I got from a lot of people in that video was they own a RetroTink 5X, and they have a compatible Magewell or DataPath or whatever capture card to do the direct interlaced capture, but it didn't support 576i PAL pass-through, and now it does. So that whole video about digitizing your tapes with the built-in time-based corrector and the Tink 5X will now fully apply to PAL users, and I'll make this very short, but essentially, you have yourself the performance of a $1,000 time-based corrector built into a $325 device, and you just need a cheap capture card in order to cheap, relatively speaking, that supports 480i in order to do that. So in many cases, it's a very, very cost-effective way to get your tapes digitized, especially if you also want the option to go to HD, or you also want this as a video game scaler. So this was just kind of a quick update for what's been going on. And hopefully eventually Mike will release version 3.99 firmware or something, just to signify that that is really the end of the enhancements. But while Mike might be able to get a couple more features in, really just think of the Tink 5X as a full FPGA in a completed product. It basically has had 3 completely different updates, like full rewrites of the software in the version 1, 2, and 3 stuff that Mike's been putting out. So if anybody bought this on launch day, you got yourself an entire other product's worth of updates completely free. And even if you buy one right now, you're buying a stable product that's been out forever. So you might not be able to get that excitement of, wow, look at this new feature, but you do get the peace of mind knowing that you have a product that is rock solid. So I'm obviously thankful to Mike for all of this stuff, and I will keep everybody updated if there's anything more to it. Next up, Derek Pescarilla just created a tool that allows you to copy save game files from CD to a VMU on your Dreamcast. And while there are many, many ways of getting save game files loaded onto your VMU, what if you don't have a modded Dreamcast? Or what if you don't have any of those extra tools? Or what if you have an ODE but nothing else? Now you're able to do that with the VMU Disc Builder. So this is one of those tools where if you already have everything that you need and all of your save game files are organized the way that you need to, you might not need this at all. But I'd be willing to bet that a lot of people listening right now are going, holy crap, this is exactly what I need for whatever. And that's why I really put emphasis on tools like this, because while this isn't something everybody needs, it's something that if you do need it, it's going to be a massive, massive help. So thanks so much to Derek for releasing this to everybody. There's more info in the post, and of course you could just download the toolkit directly from his GitHub, but this is awesome, and I really appreciate tools like this, and I think it's going to be neat to see how much easier it is to transfer certain things over. And I'm also a big fan of transferring save game files, because there's just so many times where something has happened, I'd lost a save, and I need to get back to the place without spending hours going there, and stuff like this is just a huge help. So thanks, Derek. There's some new firmware updates to the Megaswitch HD, which is that internal digital to digital HDMI mod for the Sega Genesis that essentially uses an FPGA to recreate part of the video circuit. So you're still using all original Sega Genesis chips, you're just then bypassing the video side of things and having it generated in HDMI, and you could still use original analog output as well. And the updates are pretty interesting. The first one that I think most people will want to see is dither blending, with the option to control how deep you want the blending to go. And that's awesome for transparent backgrounds that were designed to be used with composite video, like the famous waterfall in Sonic or the clouds in Creator of Senti, and there's a million other examples. But so if you play those style games, or if you play any type of game where you want the sharpness and clarity of your HDMI mod, but still with some of the blending that composite would have offered on a CRT, you could just flip this on and adjust the depth and see if it's for you. There's also a couple other features that I think are really awesome and stick with me, because even though this is definitely not going to be for the majority of Genesis games, maybe it's for you. But the developer has also added a scale 2 and 3x, which is essentially like the HQ2x smoothing option that you'd have seen in old school emulators. And it is my opinion that with 2D graphics, this really isn't something you should ever use. However, any games with 3D graphics might really benefit from this. I'd also love to see how Virtua Racing and stuff with polygons like that would look with the smoothing added to it. So I think it's very cool that he was able to add this. And while it's not going to be for the majority of Genesis games, I'd be willing to bet there's a bunch out there that might look great. Vector Man certainly comes to mind as one of them, and while I'm drawing a blank as I'm talking into the camera now, I'm sure everybody listening who's a fan of the Genesis probably has some examples that they might want to try out. So if you have this mod, it's a free firmware update. So I strongly, strongly recommend just taking a couple of minutes to do it and trying this stuff out to see what you think. There's also a video here that the developer posted that I embedded right in the post that shows some examples of all of this stuff. So, if you want to check it out, definitely skim through that video and see some examples. And if you want more on the Megaswitch HD and the audio upgrade that I did to it and everything, or adding audio into the HDMI output, check out a live stream I did a while back. But I think this is the perfect hybrid emulation, if you want to call it that, because you're still using original hardware and original cartridges or ROM carts if you choose. You still have the option for all original analog out, but you do get really high quality jailbar free HDMI as well. So if you're into internal HDMI mods, this is absolutely one you want to check out. And once again, if you already own one, do the firmware update. It's totally worth it. Next up, ArcadeWorks had stock of the NeoBIOS Masta VMC, but it looks like they're sold out. But I want to still go through this anyway, just in case maybe there's still more stock to be listed. And I also want to say that I'm sure none of this is intentional. I certainly don't intend to write posts about things you can't buy. And I'm positive these stores are trying their best to make enough for everybody, but there's so many things involved. I totally get it. It sucks, but it is what it is. However, if you were interested and these things do become available again, the NeoBIOS Masta VMC is a device that plugs into a Neo Geo MV1C motherboard that allows you to get a virtual memory card functionality out of it. You can just use this with the stock BIOS if you don't want anything else on there, but you could also purchase a UniBIOS 4.0 chip from ArcadeWorks in order to get that functionality as well, which for things like switching regions, cheat codes, pausing, there's a ton of awesome features that you get with the UniBIOS. But if you have a fancy ROM cart, maybe you don't need that. Maybe you just want the virtual memory card, especially if you go back and forth between original carts. I don't know. I think the UniBIOS is certainly worth getting if you're going to invest in any of this. A few things to note though, if you're using one of those 161-in-1 multi-carts, the VMC version of the NeoBIOS Masta sometimes has issues due to the cartridge, not to the VMC. And in fact, the 161-in-1 multi-carts would still have issues even with original memory cards as well, not just virtual memory cards. So you might just need to power off the system to change games, which is not a big deal at all. And also, it looks like Quan from ArcadeWorks said that this would only work on the MV1C, but I could swear these were working fine on the MV1Bs as well. So maybe he just means for the Omega MVS, it wouldn't fit or something like that. I'm not sure, but if they come back in stock and you have an MV1B, maybe just email and check. If you have a stock one, maybe it'll just fit fine and you don't have to worry about it. But yeah, I'm sorry that they're no longer in stock, but who knows? Maybe they'll be added, more will be added soon. And if not, and you want one of these, at least maybe you're now aware of it. So the next time something like this pops up, I'll post on social media and hopefully you'll be able to grab it as soon as it gets in stock and not have to wait again. Sorry. Next up, there's now an English translation patch available for the Sega Saturn game Princess Crown, but it seems like there's some drama around it, and it doesn't seem to be the best version of the translation. Now, I am not an expert in this game or the history behind the translation, but I think I know enough to get the story right, but my apologies in advance if I screw this up. But it appears that a couple of developers have been working on this translation for almost a decade now, and it kept getting put on the back burner because life happens and sometimes hobbies have to do that. But they really wanted to strive to do an excellent translation and make it fully playable with no bugs. And there was no publicly available version of this until a couple of days ago when another developer took an older version of their work and posted it publicly. So at the moment, I guess you could say there's an early beta out there if you really just want to try it out. But I do very much sympathize with the original developers because while I'm not a programmer, I'm guessing this is very much like somebody leaking a early demo of one of my songs before the album was released, because that's not at all a representation of how it's supposed to sound. And I don't know about other musicians, but for me, demos are very often absolute trash that are just out there to get the idea down and saved. And I could be half asleep, nothing's in time, I'm fumbling notes, but I just want to get the idea down, bring it to the other band members, and then we'll flesh it out and make it a real song. So I would be really upset if anybody other than other musicians who understand why demos sometimes sound terrible or really close friends were able to check that out. So maybe I'm looking at this all the wrong way, but it did kind of seem like a pretty disingenuous thing to do to release it this way. But you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. It's already out there if you want to check it out. But the original developers did make it very clear that the version that they've been working on is far more advanced than this one, far more completed, and there's less bugs. And they don't want this to be the example of the work that they've done. So if I'm getting any of this wrong, my apologies. This one just kind of sounds like one of those situations that could have been avoided, but at least if you want to very quickly check out Princess Crown and see what it's like, maybe do so, but do so knowing that the real translation is going to happen at some point. So yeah, that kind of stinks. But the Shiro crew has this post that kind of sums it all up on RetroRGB. But if you want the details, they linked to their post as well that really kind of gets into all of this stuff. So, it sucks that this happened, but who knows? Maybe this will just kind of make things finish up and move along. I don't know. That really left a bad taste in my mouth. But once again, I don't know the full story, so who knows? Maybe I just got all of this stuff wrong, except the leaking of music demos. I would be very pissed if somebody leaked one of my early demos before the song was actually out there. After the song was released, fine. Go take a look at how much it used to suck, but not before. Now it's time for this week's Mr. Updates, care of Lou from Lou's Retro Source. As usual, I'm just going to skim through these real quick and give my thoughts where I feel like it, but if you want visual examples and a lot more details, please check out Lou's video. First up, Wizzo just opened a new shop where you could buy Tap2 devices in full kits if you want to. So you could get just the cards, just the readers, and complete or do-it-yourself form, or a full kit with everything you need, which is awesome. So thank you very much, Wizzo, for doing this, because a lot of people just want to get started, but they don't have time to get everything piece by piece. So very cool. There's also a sticker applicator, and while I'm kind of laughing because it's funny to think that somebody made that, but if you ever try to align stickers to anything just right, I mean, I screw them all up every time. So if you're going to print out a bunch of stickers in order to put on these cards, getting an applicator that helps you line it up properly every time is absolutely worth it. So you could get one of those as well. Next up, the in-development CDI core has even more updates, including things like an additive color mixer so that you could get the intro cutscenes in Zelda's Adventure. Every time I talk about this, I tell you how excited I am for a CDI core, and my excitement is not going down at all. This is very cool, and I can't wait to use it on the Mister, especially with like real mouse support, real controller support. Next up, the creators of the Mr. Multisystem released an SNES 2-player snack adapter that plugs right into the multisystem cartridge port. So owners of standard Mr. setups could also use the adapter because there's a port for a USB cable if you wanted to do it externally like that. Or if you have a Mr. Multisystem or Koala's M3 Mr., which is based off of that, you could just purchase this and plug it in. Next up, the Salamander Arcade Core now has a public release, and this is developed by Reiki, and all you need to do is run the update script in order to get it. Hotego's team had some fixes applied to X-Men, Sunset Riders, The Simpsons, Parodius Da, and Tekken World Cup. Takon? I know I'm pronouncing that wrong. My apologies. So as always, thanks to Hotego and his team for even going back and tweaking older cores as they're working on newer ones. Next up, just a reminder that Mr. Add-on sells an adapter that converts composite video to RF for CRTs that only have RF inputs. I've talked about this a lot when it was released, and I'll just give the short version. You could do this with a VCR, but a VCR is big and bulky, and this is a small, compact device. It's also $35, which I think is an excellent price because those RF boxes don't come cheap. And I just think that if you're somebody who wants to use an RF only TV, this might just be an easy way to interface composite video. Just remember that the closer you are to a city or lots of wireless interference, the worse it gets. But if you're out in the burbs, there's basically no difference between composite video. You'll get mono audio, but depending on the console you're using, that might not matter anyway. Next, Reiki announced that the Twinbee core will possibly be released in November, and it's a cartoony vertical scrolling shooter by Konami. So to all developers, no rush. It's done when it's done. We all get it, but it's cool to know that another vertical shooter is coming. And lastly, Retro Remake is showed off their first snack adapter, which is a 1-player adapter for the SNES core. And the picture made it look like one where you have to link it into another adapter. You can't just plug it directly into the user I/O snack port. But maybe I'm wrong about that one. I'm a much bigger fan of adapters where you just need to plug it directly in and not have to use multiple adapters. Those drive me crazy. And I truly think that turns a lot of people off from buying them because They don't get why you need to plug so many things into other things. I get it. You shouldn't have to be a hardware nerd just to play Mister. So, but check it out and see if it's for you. So that's it for the Mister stuff. As always, thanks so much to Lou for keeping up with all of it. There's no way I would be able to. And if you rely on Lou as much as I do, please also consider supporting him on Patreon, because I do, and I'm really happy to help keep his work going. Unfortunately, I got to end this week on a kind of a depressing note. The store Retro Gamer Stuff in the UK, run by Adam, aka Badad84, is now closing. I guess the good news is Adam is putting up a 50% off sale on all items, which means most items are now being sold for less than cost, just to clear off remaining stock and get the store shut down. This mostly happened because Shopify has continued being one of the worst companies to work with, almost as bad as PayPal, not quite, and forced Adam to delist certain items that absolutely weren't in violation of anything. So I guess Adam has been kind of going back and forth recently because he started another business that's doing great. And anybody that's ever started their own business knows if you don't put everything you have into it, it's not going to be as good as it could be. So I guess this Shopify incident was Adam's push to say, okay, I need to focus on that. So I'm going to shut down Retro Gamer Stuff. But I completely understand and sympathize. And, I wish him the best. And I'm happy that his new business is going to work out. But it's just depressing because it was a great, reliable store. And Adam has been helping me for over a decade, since the days of Assembler Games, where I couldn't really figure out who was just being an asshole and who was just harshly explaining to me that at the time I didn't know what I was doing, but thought I did. Dunning-Kruger syndrome. And Adam was one of the few patient people that stuck to his guns, but really helped walk me through a lot of the stuff and got me to where I am today. There's been a few people over the years that really helped shape RetroRGB, and also helped me to understand when I'm wrong and people are just being direct versus when people are just trolling. So, it sucks to see you go, Adam. Thank you for everything over the years. You're always welcome back. And the only other note that I have to say to everybody is that Adam's not just closing the store and leaving. If you had any pre-orders, those will be fulfilled. If you need support within reason, the same way you would have needed it if the store was open, Adam's still going to be there for that. This isn't a case of like take people's money and run. This is just, I'm going to stop selling stuff and then leave the website up for a little while to slowly transition things over. And then once everything's run its course, then not sure what he's going to do with the website. But so yeah, this isn't just a pull the plug and bail scenario. Everybody's going to get what they paid for. And if Adam's over a decade of almost two, I think, reputation in the scene isn't good enough for you, then I don't know what possibly could be. But so yeah, don't worry. If you want the full story, Adam put the announcement up on the website. I linked to it right there. And of course, if you want anything that's still in stock, just use the coupon code that I have listed here in the post, and you get 50% off stock until it runs out. So thanks again, Adam, for the over decade of help. And, if you ever need anything, always reach out, because I still feel like I owe you one. Well, that's it for this week. I was able to catch up with a couple of posts, but there's still a lot of stuff on the back burner that I have to get to. A couple of awesome videos from Tito from Macho Nacho Productions, for example. MVG had another great video that I wanted to talk about. I'm going to try to catch up with all of that in the coming week or two, but I think this upcoming week is going to be probably the craziest yet. So next week might be a real short one. I might have to miss the Q&As again, but it looks like there's a light at the end of the tunnel coming. So hopefully there's only going to be a few more weeks of craziness. But as I say that, life happens sometimes. So who knows? Maybe this is the beginning of a large uphill battle. I don't know. I'll find out when it gets there. But I do just feel bad because while I give 100% in everything that I do, sometimes when you don't have enough time, 100% this week might not be nearly as good as 100% last week. So I don't want to feel like I'm letting anybody down, but I am doing my best, and that's all I could promise. I'm going to just keep doing my best to get these out, get the posts up, and especially anything time sensitive. Us, as well as the other writers, will try our best to get any of that up on time. So at the very least, you won't miss any pre-orders or anything like that. But stuff that isn't time sensitive, expect that to go to the wayside. And if you feel like I missed anything, please let me know in the comments, but try to do it a little politely, because I might already know about whatever you're talking about. I just haven't had time to get there yet, or maybe I haven't heard of it at all. The only thing I'll mention again that I always have to say is please don't put links in the comments. The way YouTube's been working for the past couple of years, they just delete any URL links. It doesn't even show up in my held for review bin. It doesn't show up at all. So if you're like, hey, check out the new product by, say the name of the product and the developer, and I could just do a web search for it and find where I'm looking for. But so yeah, I guess that's basically it. So as always, thanks to everyone who watches, listens, plays nicely in the comments, and especially thank you to everybody who supports on any of those monthly services and continues to support when I'm not getting the content out that I would normally like to. It means so much that you're all still with me, and thank you all so much, because it really is you who's keeping this all going. So thanks again, and I will definitely see you next week for the weekly roundup. Maybe not for the Q&As. I'll find out in a couple of days, I guess. This week's roundup is brought to you by Neo Paradigm Entertainment, connecting Southeast Asian influencers with opportunities in the West.